let's just sew whatever. Hello and welcome to the YouTubes. Whatever. In today's video, we are going to be making the Swoon Charlotte handbag. Yes, it's called the Charlotte City Tote. Anyway, this is the 90% size, which is about 10 inches wide and about 6 inches deep. This is the size that I love making. The first time I made this bag, I was like, it's kind of big. You kind of have to charge a lot for the amount of materials, etc. But I find that 90% sells the best for me, and it's just so darn classy looking. In this video, I go over how to interface the bag, what kind of materials you need. It's really not that complicated, and with the less interfacing, the more able you'll be able to make it with a domestic machine. I have no doubt that when I had first made this bag, had I used these methods, I would have had 0 issues. That's not true. I still would have had a lot of issues, but this is a lot easier for me to make. We added purse feet to the bottom. We used Decaville heavy on the bottom, Decaville light and woven fuse everywhere else, and then waterproof canvas for the lining. I show you guys how to make this like zippered slip pocket. You could add 2 to your bag or none, whatever you want to do. It's your bag, I don't care. These snap hooks, most people don't really know what the snap hooks are for, so you could leave those off if you wanted to. I find that's something that will deteriorate over time with the use of your bag. But then the snap tabs go like that. Not really sure what else to say. I feel like I explained most of it pretty well in this video. Don't forget to subscribe before you watch, because I don't know what it helps, but it helps. This man is so chattery. Ben says, please subscribe. If you want to see more videos with him, please subscribe. Enjoy the video. You want to say something? Alright, so to make this bag, we're going to need pre-made piping, a 1/2 inch snap hook and a 1/2 inch D-ring, 1 magnetic snap, 6 purse feet and washers, which I have in a drawer, and then 4 3/4 inch square rings. As I stated in the intro, I am making this bag at 90%, which means we printed it not at 100%, but at 90%. So all of the measurements are going to be a little bit smaller, but I feel like this is like the perfect handbag, very classy, very Marc Jacobs-esque. But I really like the size of this bag at 90%. It's very large at 100, which isn't bad, but just saying. So let's get started. Okay, so we are going to start off first with our lining pieces. Because the Charlotte is such a square bag, the main panels anyway, I like to start with those first. I know that the bag is basically a rectangle, but the size is very similar. So when I'm cutting my out, I always like to make sure that I keep it folded so that I know which way is which for my bag. And then I like to fold the bottom panel as well. It's kind of overkill because obviously you know which way this goes, but it just kind of helps me figure it out later. So we should have our 2 side panels, our 2 main panels. I've got my zippered pocket pieces, and then I also have cut out something that I like to call a zippered slip pocket. And this is very easy to make, but it adds a little bit of extra pocketness to your bag that I think my customers at least tend to really like. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to use silver for my lining, and I'm going to use white thread just for now anyway. So I'm going to grab one of my panels. I'm going to grab 2 of these. It's been a while since I've done a video tutorial, you can tell. This is the main panel cut about 4 inches shorter and a little bit wider. This is going to be 2 pieces for our zippered slip pocket. Since I'm using waterproof canvas, I'm only using 2 pieces, but if you're using just regular quilting cotton, you'll want 4 of these pieces total. You're basically just making a large zipper pouch and then adding it as a pocket. So I've got a 9-inch all-purpose zipper ready to go. So I'm just going to line this up along the top, face down. And then if you were using a lining fabric, you would lay that down as well right now. So my zipper is teeth down, and then you would lay a lining piece on top, but I'm not using a lining piece. So I'm just sewing right along the edge. And then I'm going to flip it down. And you can just press it with your finger or you can use your iron. If you had a lining piece, you would flip it all the way, press it nicely, and top stitch. But with waterproof canvas, that's just going to be way too thick. You could add some extra separation inside this pocket as well if you wanted to add like maybe a pen divider, something like that. Again, this is just like a super quick way to add more pockets with less energy, I guess. If you really want to, you could, hello Ben, kind of flip your zipper down at a 90-degree angle. Not necessary, but you can see how that looks with it flipped at a 90-degree angle. And then again, if you need to, you can iron it, but you'll just be pulling your lining and your top fabric away from each other. Again, just like a giant zippered pocket. Kind of press that together. And since I'm using waterproof canvas, I don't have that lining piece, but you'll just push your seam towards the bottom. So you're stitching through your zipper tape. Hopefully you can see that. Trim all your little excess threads. And then we will just put those lining sides together. And then if you want to, you can baste it right now, but we're actually just going to lay it onto our lining fabric and then baste it. And just line up the bottoms. I usually like my zipper pull going from this direction down, so that's totally up to you. And just baste all those layers together. If you want to use a longer zipper than a 9-inch zipper, you totally can. You'll just cut off the excess within your seams, but I think it's a lot easier to use a 9-inch zipper because then it's going to come just at your seam allowance, so it's not going to add too much bulk. And you'll see you've got a slip pocket here and then a pocket here you can zip and unzip like so. And then while we're at it, we can go ahead and add our lining bottom panel, 1/2-inch seam allowance. And then I like to give it a little top stitch. And I think that just helps it sit nicer within the bag. Okay, so now we can add our zippered pocket to the lining. Again, you want to make sure that you've got your centered piece or your main panel folded in the center. It's just gonna help you later on for sure. Then fold these in opposite directions. So this is my lining pocket piece. And just kind of line up the center folds. I've got my zipper template from bypiera.com. I'm just gonna add a 7-inch zipper pocket. Trace that out. Mine looks a little bit different. This was a tester that she had that I purchased from her. Only because I've broken my full-size ones more times than I can count, because I'm a klutz. All right, and then I'm just gonna trace these 2 parallel lines. I'm using a smaller stitch length, about a 4. Come down the other side. And you want to make those as parallel as possible if you're not tracing out the entire box. Okay. I'm gonna grab some really sharp scissors. These are Kai scissors. They're the V5210. My friend Nikki sent me these for my birthday, and I was so excited. They're so sharp, and they get into that corner really well, so I can just cut right up to it but not through it with that super sharp point. I love it. And I'm just cutting through the center, and then about 1/2 inch from the opposite side, I'm cutting out at like a Y or a V shape to that thread just right next to it. And then we're gonna flip it through. And I'm gonna carefully press it from the lining side and use a lot of steam. Using a lot of steam is gonna help you keep your layers straight and cause less puckering, especially if you're working with waterproof canvas, because the steam makes it more malleable without melting it. So hopefully you can see. All I've done off camera is just steam it a little bit. Now I'm gonna go ahead and grab a zipper. I'm gonna grab a red zipper. I always like to iron my zippers, again, using a lot of steam. I'm gonna use a handbag zipper for this, just because I think that big pull looks really nice inside a bag and it's easy to grab. You do not have to add a zipper to this if you don't want to. You could just leave it as a big open slip pocket. I know a lot of my customers are like, I never zip it up. So up to your personal preference, or if you even have a zipper lying around. And then I'm just going to stitch it in place. I always like to eyeball and make sure my zipper looks nice and straight. Hold it in place while I sew. Straighten that back up. I'm going to grab my thread zap so that these don't fray. I finally changed the battery on this, so I'm not using a lighter as often. I did drop it, which is probably unsafe, but it still works fine, so I haven't changed out the fuse yet. And then I'm gonna take the other side of my lining pocket, lay it right sides together, just double check that I've caught all of my zipper tape. Lay that on top. And then sew around from the bottom at a U shape. When I'm making this bag, I always like to start out with my lining, especially if you're new to this bag. You'll want to start out with the lining because the side curves are hard to do, and they're even harder to do when you're using piping, which is what this bag calls for. So definitely recommend the lining first. So I'm going to fold up that pocket just so we've got a nice finished edge when we turn the bag, and I'm going to press it. Again, I use more steam than pressure because this waterproof canvas can melt. Okay, so we're good to go there. Go ahead and lay these right sides together. Clip it along the bottom. 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to top stitch it. And then to add our side panels, we're going to fold these together, tops together, and then I'm just going to snip into the center, just a tiny little snip, and then I'm going to do the same for the side panels. Just going to fold these in half and make a snip. And then we're going to just do this one at a time. You're going to line up those bottom snips, make sure right sides are together. So there's my little snip, and there it is there. Add a clip, add a clip, add a clip. And this is just at that bottom straight side. And then we're going to bring the side to the top, lining up the tops of that panel. And repeat there. Again, I highly encourage that you try it with your lining first. And then you'll just kind of clip your way along the sides until you get to the curve where you're just kind of gonna pinch them together. So I just kind of pinch it, if that makes sense. And clip. And this takes a little bit of finesse, and you're going to want to make sure that your pattern pieces are cut pretty exact so that they fit really nicely together. So that's what that looks like. And then if you want to for your lining, you can use a stapler to keep it all together. I will definitely do that for my exterior, but I don't usually do it for the lining just because it's less severe if it's not 100% correct. So we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top and then kind of grade it to a little bit wider of a seam allowance as we get towards the bottom, just so our lining isn't saggy. And then as we go, just kind of slowly work your way around that curve. And if you need to stop, just make sure you leave your needle within your fabric and kind of lift up your foot and resituate. I made that a lot easier than it looked. I made it look a lot easier than it is because I've made so many of these bags. But I can remember that when I first made this bag, I screamed and cried at these darn curves. But I promise you guys can do it if you just keep trying. This is probably the 30th time I've made this bag. I think that's safe to say. And I remember the first time I saw this bag was my friend Dana made it, and she made it with this Tartus fabric and some white glitter vinyl, and I was like, oh, I want to make that bag. So I bought a bunch of fabric that I designed, and I bought a bunch of glitter vinyl, and I was like, I'm gonna make this bag. And I spent $40 on interfacing and definitely cried about it, and just cried and cursed through all the bags. But I think they all went to new homes, and I was like, I'm never making that pattern again. And then like a year later, I made 6 more. Yeah. I love the shape of this bag. I love it. Again, it's so classy. If you make it with like all vinyl or something like that and like some pops of color, so classy. So there are my side panels all clipped together. You can see there's a little bit of bunching in the curves, but that is okay because it'll sew out. So 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top. Just kind of work your way down. If you used a longer zipper, please make sure it's not metal, or when you sew through those teeth, you're gonna break a zipper. Ugh, you're gonna break a needle, not a zipper. Ben, can you not lay on all that? I need to, can you just, thanks. I'm gonna need this too. Oh, all right, thanks. Appreciate you. Okay, anyway, we'll get to those in a minute. And I'm just kind of pulling on my fabric to get it through that curve. So I'm guiding it with this hand, my right hand, and just kind of, you can see I'm like manipulating the fabric with this hand and letting the machine just grab the fabric. Okay. And you definitely want to make sure you backstitch at those curves. Trim your excess thread. So there's what your lining looks like. You can definitely add more if you need to. You could add 2 of these pockets. They're really cool. You can add 2 zipper pockets on top of those, but it sits really nicely. And I love the size at 90%. So I'm gonna trim down my excess seam allowance. Man, this is a big difference compared to those Kai scissors. So as you can see, that waterproof canvas has a lot of body. I haven't added any interfacing, and it just kind of stands up on its own. So that's going to reduce the amount of interfacing you need for the exterior, because this is going to give your bag so much body straight off the gate. So now I'm going to change out my thread color, and we'll get started on the exterior of the bag. All right, you guys, now we can start on the exterior. I'm so sorry that the orientation of the video changed. I had it set to something else. That's my bad. Please don't yell at me. I'm only human. Okay, so while I've got a full bobbin, I'm going to go ahead and start with my straps. Normally I cut the straps to 27 inches for this bag, but I cut them to 24 this time. But it shouldn't be too much of a difference. It'll still be a really cute size. And you can, of course, make them longer or shorter. I will say that a crossbody strap for this bag doesn't work super well. It's a little bit easier at this size, but it just isn't great, especially for the way the bag closes. So that's one thing. Maybe if it were a tiny bit smaller at 85%, maybe it could be cute, but I wouldn't recommend it. I am just really quick steaming my piping to get rid of the little kinks in it. So that's what I'm doing off camera, just because my iron was heated up. Okay, all right. So now we can go ahead and get started. I'm gonna put my stitch length up to 5, unpeel my double-sided tape, This double-sided tape is from waywack.com. If you guys ever need links to items, they are down below in the description. I do my best to answer questions, but sometimes I'm like, guys, just click the little arrow. It'll show you the description. It's okay. The vinyl that I'm using is kind of a woven backed vinyl, and it is from FM Stores in Springfield, Missouri. I go there for my supplies. It's like a 4-hour drive, but it's totally worth it for their prices. They do ship, but you have to call to order. And I've never done that, so I don't know. Next time I visit them, I'm considering asking them if there's any way they can make like an online catalog at least so that people can call that way. I think that would come in handy quite a bit. Okay, so I'm just folding my fabric into the 1/2 inch line, 1.5 inch, I should say. These handles are 3 inches wide to make 3/4 inch handles. So the 1.5 inch mark is halfway. They're all taped up. So now if you really wanted to, you could add a smaller piece of double-sided tape there and fold them over, but I'm just gonna fold as I go, or you can fold it together and clip it. But I've made so many that it's not that big of a deal. So I'm gonna start at the bottom, back stitch, and then fold and go. And then I'm not going to trim it off. I'm just going to add my other one. And I'm going to use my thread zap to trim all of my threads. And the reason I use this for my threads is because I'm using a bonded polyester thread, so it can fray over time, and this will just kind of seal the end and keep it from fraying. And I'm burning stuff, which is fun. Okay, so now if you wanted to, you could add strap ends, which I may do later. I haven't decided, but for now I'm just going to trim the ends down to my stitching. And this just helps remove any unevenness or kind of trim out the double-sided tape if you could see it. And then our straps are done. Whoops. And I threw them on the ground. Yay! All right, so now we can attach our accent panels. My main fabric is a linen cotton canvas from Swoon Flower. This is my own fabric design, and I've interfaced it with Woven Fuse and Decoville Light. You can see I kind of used little scraps because this is the seam allowance. It's not that big of a deal if it's not within the seam allowance. So you can kind of see there, just using up scraps. For the side panels, I only added Woven Fuse because I don't want them to be super, super stiff. And then you have to think, if you're using waterproof canvas, that's gonna add a lot to it as well. So I'm gonna switch my stitch length down to 4.5, and I'm gonna top stitch very slowly around this top curve. If you have excess piping and you wanna have fun, you could also add your piping into this seam. It looks really cool. I've done it for a few bags. You can see there, if you just add it in, maybe use a little tape or basting spray. And I'm following the inside edge of my foot. So I'm like 1/8 of an inch from the outer edge. And you want to go pretty slow so that your vinyl doesn't pucker or shift. Definitely want to use a walking foot if you can. I'm going to add a little bit of oil to my machine so it stops squeaking. Hopefully that helps. And then I'm going to baste it along the bottom and side. I feel like most of this bag is like prep work and then it comes together really fast. Maybe that's just me. Basting spray definitely helps keep things from puckering, or you can use double-sided tape. Okay. And then side panel, I'm going to stitch along the top of that. And then I am going to baste along the side. Even though we're going to add more to this side panel, it's just easier to keep everything from shifting. Side panels. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the snap connectors, or the snap pieces. I like to cut one of these down, one side down first. So make one side the actual shape you need, or pretty close to it. And then I keep one side just a square the size approximately. We're gonna grab our magnetic snap piece, peel off our plastic. I think that ultra slim magnets work great for this, but if all you have are regular, like I do, then those work great too. Gonna go ahead and mark those out. I added a piece of Decaville Heavy to help interface the vinyl, especially since this is a thinner vinyl, but also this snap is going to probably endure a lot of stress, so you want to make sure it's well interfaced. And just add one piece to each side. Add your washer. Flatten it down. You could really go either way with your snap ends. I worry sometimes that I'll hit them if they're pointed out, but it also wears faster on your vinyl if it's in. So whatever you want to do. I'm going to use some double-sided tape to hold these together while I sew them. Basting spray works well for this too. Whatever you have. Will work. Yeah. If you have trouble peeling off the basting tape, I like to push down on one side and secure it really well, and then pull on my fabric, and this just kind of lifts up on its own. Voila, goodbye, goodbye. You could keep them together, but I'm going to cut it in half. And we're going to sew around the outer edge. You can use a stitch length of 4.5 to keep it consistent, or maybe go with a 4. I'm going to stick with 4.5. And again, I'm following the inside edge of the foot along the outside. Just go really slow. Hand crank if you have to, or just go one by one. And then I'm just turning it, pivoting it, if you will, at the snap. Nice and slow. Back stitch. Trim your excess. And then we're going to trim it all down in a minute. Ooh. I could be using my thread burner, but whatever. So I'm going to grab my super sharp scissors, and I'm just going to cut as close to that edge as possible without, you know, being way too close or anything like that. If you want to, you could add a sealant to the edge, maybe some, what is it called? My brain is a little sick still. Edge coat, add some edge coat. Edge coat does work on vinyl, especially the water-based one, I believe. So just really close to the edge, trimming it down. These super sharp scissors really help. And you want to try and go in one fluid motion if you can, so that there's no like jagged marks or anything like that. And then I'm just gonna snip into the center of that piece. Okay. And then we're gonna purr up our snap tabs. And these are what bring the edges, the side edges of the bag together. Most people don't realize that. They think it's like a clip for your keys, and I just say whatever to that. Like, if that's what you want to use it for, that's cool with me. So I'm going to mark out 3-inch lines. This is not really how the pattern says to do it, it's just the way I do it. And then I'm going to mark out a 6-inch line. And a piece of tape. 2 3-inch pieces of tape, basically. Okay. Or just about. Peel the tape off. Grab a snap hook or 1/2-inch D-ring from either side. Bring that to the 1/2-inch mark, and then line up your sides and fold it together. I don't believe that this is really necessary, especially for the smaller size, but it is a little added security measure. Someday I would love to make this bag with a zipper, but it just hasn't been a thing that I've done. Just kind of fold those together. And then what I do is I'll stitch from one side to the other. So I'm going to start across the top, give a little back stitch. If you have a walking foot machine like mine, go ahead and cover up your snap hook or you'll pretty much damage it. Back stitch there, because we're going to separate the pieces. And sew down the other side. Again, use just a scrap piece to protect it. Back stitch, come down and back stitch again. And we'll use our thread burner. Trim all of our little excess threads. Okay, and then we're going to just cut this in half right there. So you can definitely sew those together as two separate pieces. I just find it easier if I make them all at once. So there is that all finished. So now I'm going to work on my strap connectors. Again, I just feel like this bag is so much prep work, and then once it all is put together, it comes together really fast. So I am doing my connectors a little bit different, especially for the mini. I don't think those like flappy connectors are necessary, even though they're super cute. So I cut mine to 4 inches by 1.5 inches wide, and then I'm just going to fold them in half and in half again. If you've made my Emily bag, it's kind of a similar thing, just instead of 1 inch wide, it's 3/4, which you could of course change up for your own needs. Fold your raw edges in towards the center. If you're using a thinner fabric, you could add a little bit of interfacing to make them sturdier. Couldn't hurt. And if you're using this double-sided tape, please make sure you get a pair of non-stick scissors, because it will gum up your scissors if not. So just folding the raw edges into the center. And then I'm going to use another piece of tape and then another piece of tape. So I'm adding a piece of tape about 1 inch from the bottom, give or take. I'm going to grab my 4 square rings. These are the 3/4 inch square rings from their website. These are the simple version. And folding the top down about 3/4 of the way, and then the bottom a little more. I do not like to fold them halfway because the weight is more so coming from the top. So you want to make sure that that is nice and secure. And then of course the bottom needs to be secure as well, but it's not, it doesn't have as much stress being put on it. So that's my reasoning anyway. I remember she did update this pattern. This is from Swoon, if I didn't say it already. And it used to be that you would add your connectors over top of like piping and a bunch of layers. It was really awkward. So I was really glad when she updated it. And I love when pattern designers kind of grow and you can see that. So I'm gonna add another piece of tape. This time I'm using just the 1/4 inch wide because I can. And if your machine gums up with this double-sided tape, you'll definitely want to invest in this 1/4 inch wide. Okay. So now we can grab our main panels once again and add these to it. So I think it's, yeah, 1.5, okay, 1.5 inch from the top and then 1 inch from the side. So what I do is I'll grab this larger ruler to mark out my 1.5 inches, and then I'll grab my smaller 1 inch ruler and lay it right in the corner so that I know it's nice and straight. And you could definitely add these anywhere you want, really, but this is what the pattern says to do, so that's what I'm doing. So there's that. And then again, 1.5 from the top, 1 inch from the side. So I'll go ahead and clip this on the opposite side, and then I can get it nice and tight. Peel off the backing of your double-sided tape. And if you have issues with your connectors not looking straight at any point, this will definitely help. And I would definitely encourage you to use double-sided tape. Press it down. Put that back. Sorry, Ben. And then we can stitch these on. If your machine is not strong enough to go through these connectors, then I would suggest using 2 rivets, one at the top, one at the bottom, to hold it in place. But I'll go ahead and zoom you guys in and we'll sew those on. My skirt is covered in thread. Why? I don't know. All right, so I'm keeping my stitch length at 4.5. I'm going to start at the top of the connector, back stitch, go forward, pivot, and then I'm just using a big scrap of leather to cover my connector. You can see what's happened to the connector. That's what would happen, or to the leather. That's what would happen to your connector with the walking foot. So it's good and bad. Just gotta learn to work with it. And then to get my needle to go where I want it to, I just kind of hold down my reverse to set it up. Back stitch. And again, I'm gonna use my thread burner. Okay. And repeat. And then I'm going to add a rivet to the top. Again, you can add 2 rivets if you want, but I don't know that it would add any extra reinforcement. It would just be for looks at that point. If you are using a scrap piece of leather or vinyl, you'll want to make sure that you don't accidentally sew it to your connector. Just speaking from experience there. Okay, so there are all of my connectors attached. I'm going to go ahead and add rivets, and then we will get the snaps and side connectors attached, as well as the piping, and then we're almost finished with this bag. All right, so to attach our snaps and side connectors, we're gonna fold our main panel in half. I'm gonna make a little snip. We're basically folding all of our exterior pieces in half and adding snips. because that's just how I roll. And while you're at it, you could even snip the bottom of your side panel, because we're going to need it for later. I was like, what did I write on that? All right, nice and snipped. So your side panels get this snap hook and D-ring combo just at the top, centered, and I'm going to give it a pretty good basting. I've had my basting stitches come out before and they fell out, and I was like, well, great, what do I do now? Hold on to that for me, Ben. Thank you. And then again, just line it up with the center. Get a good basting. And you really want to trim your excess threads on that so they don't get caught in your top stitch, and then you're like, where is this coming from? All right, so center snip. Line up the center snips with your snap facing down for both pieces. The first time I did this, I was super confused. I thought maybe they were supposed to go in opposite directions so they meet on top, but they're supposed to fold down and snap together like that. Hopefully that makes sense. So these are the snaps, not like this. But again, it's personal preference. I've seen people do it the other way and it looks fine. Nothing wrong with it. Hold on to that for me. He's getting so mad. All right, so again, lining up our center snips and center snips. And baste into place. All right, and then I should probably add a nameplate to this bag. Before I forget, I can just hear Helen. I shouldn't say hear, I can see her comment. Don't forget your nameplate. Or Inga. I think she's done it too. My nameplates, I will be doing a video on how I ordered them soon. These are tiny little baby 1.5 inch wide. I thought that would be plenty big, but they're so tiny. That's what she said. So I'm just kind of extending from that center snip into my bag, centering that measurement, and using a seam ripper making sure it's facing up, and adding my washer. Bada bing. You can add a little bit of glue as well if you want, or even tape. Things happen, things fall out. So now we're ready to, we could go ahead and attach our bottom panel and then our piping. So let's go ahead and do that. When you're making the miniature one, well, when I'm making it anyway, I cut my interfacing like a normal bag. I don't cut it big and like try to fuse it later. I find that that doesn't work for me, especially if you have a domestic machine and or aren't great at fusing interfacing, honestly. So I like this. I remember, again, that first fiasco of making Charlotte's. I was trying to fuse my Peltex and I was like, it's not fusing. And my husband had to help me. He was like, you're not counting to 10. That's your problem. And I'm like, yes, I am. But I was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Just because I was short fused. All right, so we're going to sew right next to our stabilizer. And then to figure out the size stabilizer you'll need, you just want to measure your piece and subtract 1/2 inch from all sides. I feel like this could also work for the larger size, but totally up to you. And then I'm gonna top stitch. doing? Why does this feel wrong? All right. Weird. And then your seam allowance should be facing in. And this would be the case if you were fusing your Peltex to the size it says to. What are you doing, Ben? What are you doing? Yeah. So now we're going to go ahead and add our purse feet. I like to add 6 to this bag, but you could also just add 5. Personal preference as always. What are you? You're going to get a drink of water? Is that what's happening? You don't know? You're so weird. Whatever. Alright. I'm going to grab my 6 purse feet. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 6 washers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't put those on the fabric. Benjamin, stop it. Stop it, you jerk. Stop it. Get down. Get down. This purse foot well, By Pierre has a purse foot template. I like to add them 1 inch from the outer edge, so this is too wide for me, but if you were interested, here's what it looks like. I use that on round bags as well as like if I add purse feet before I attach them to the bag. But I like to go 1 inch from my top stitching and 1.5 inches from the side. Benjamin, stop it. Stop it. So again, 1.5 and 1 inch. If you do it again, I'm gonna hurt you. And then just kind of eyeballing the center. No, I won't. How wide is the center? I think it's 10.5. Yeah, 10.5. So 5.25 is the center. I could do that. There we go. I would have been close. Nothing irks me more than when I see a photo of a bag online and like the purse feet aren't even close to being correct. Like, we're all humans, so we can't get it perfect, but I'm like, did you even try? What is happening there? Okay, so I'm using my seam ripper to mark the slits for my purse feet. And then you want to make sure that you put it in the same direction. So don't try to put it in perpendicular because it's not going to work very easily. Purse feet, I think just really up the class of a bag. Whenever I tell people like, oh, it's lined with waterproof canvas, they're like, ooh, and then I'm like, and it has purse feet. They're like, ah. So then I give them a little purple nurple, twist it so that it is perpendicular. That's going to give it a little extra security. And then grab all my washers, kind of split them open and go in between those sides. You can go through the center, but that's not going to give it as much security as this is. Because it could come straight out of the other, of the center, but it's not going to come out as easily if it has to go through angles. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. But don't take my word for it. And I sell purse feet in packs of 5. So if you would like 6, it means you have to buy 2 packs and then you'll just have 4 extra for a smaller bag. Not a big deal. All right, so now that I have that done, I'm going to find my center again and make a little snip. center, center, and make a little snip. So then I can set that to the side and we can work on piping. So for that, we're gonna make 1 inch from the top marks. So I'm gonna measure 1 inch from the top and make a little mark on every top side of the side panels. And then we're going to grab our piping piece. 1 package of pre-made piping should be enough. If you would like to make your own, keep on watching and I'll tell you what measurements you need for the 90% bag. So I folded that at like a 45-degree, 90-degree angle, and then I'm just gonna slowly clip along the curve. And you can see that I'm not lining it up straight with the edge because we need it to be a 1/2 inch seam allowance and this is not 1/2 inch wide. So you just want to keep like 1/8 of an inch of your fabric showing, if you can. This is already hard enough, so do your best. Oh my gosh, Ben. Sorry, he almost knocked something down. Okay. So we'll just keep clipping it, and then we're at that 90-degree angle. So you just kind of fold it on itself. That takes a little finesse, but line it up with that 1 inch mark and then clip it into place. And there is our piping attached. This should be enough. Maybe not quite. So you'll want about 24 inches of piping per side for the 90% bag size. So folded that on itself. And you can add a wonder clip if you want. I find that these hair clips work great. A lot of people ask me where I get them. I purchase mine through Sally Beauty, but I've heard they're available at Walmart or on Amazon as well. I need to look up a link for those for you guys. I hope this is enough. Should be enough. Oh, just enough. Like literally just enough. Definitely want 24 inches. It's not the end of the world if you can't fold it off at a 90-degree angle. If you just kind of like twist it, it'll work. It's gonna go in your seam allowance anyway, so it'll work. So I'm gonna go ahead and zoom you guys in while I sew this piping on because it does take a little bit of practice. All right, hopefully you guys can see that a little bit better. So here is the outer edge of my foot, here is the inner edge of my foot. And this might be easier for you if you have an actual piping foot or if you have a zipper foot. But I have found that I can make this work no problem. So I'm going to start from the top and back stitch. And I want to have my outer foot on top of the piping, and then my inner foot is like just kind of at the edge of the thick piece of the piping. And I'm just gonna kind of follow that guide. Again, this works for me. It may not work very well for you, but it works. So I don't want to sew way too close to it, not like through it especially, because we're going to use this stitch line as a guide so that we can sew right next to it. So hopefully you can kind of see here here is the manufacturer stitching and here is mine. So that's where we want to be for our basting stitch. At least that's where I want to be. I don't know where you want to be. Hello, Ben. Is this where you want to be? Hi, baby. Yeah. Back stitch. And then I like to sew along the outside edge of this as well, because I've had this kind of flip up before, and then it's on the outer portion of my bag. It's on the exterior of my bag, and I don't like that. So we're just going to sew that down as well. And right about now, you should be running out of bobbin thread if you have an industrial machine. I always like to switch over before I start adding my side panels, because there is nothing worse than running out when you're attaching the side panel. Like, I scream every time if it happens. So hopefully you're able to see where my piping is in comparison to the foot. And I'm not watching my needle, I'm watching the outer edge. I'm watching my foot on top of the piping. Okay. And then again, we're going to secure the outside of the piping. Nope, I'm not risking it. I was like, my bobbin thread might be okay because I didn't sew my lining with it. Oh, we're good, we're good. Ooh. No, I'm gonna switch it. I was like, watch me eat my words and regret that. So, just gonna switch out, why not? What do you want, kitty baby? Yeah. No. Alright, so I'm not going to need these clips for a minute. Alright, so we're going to take one of our side panels and we're going to line it up just like we did the exterior. We're going to line up the side center snips ×3 just along the bottom part of the bag. After I zoom you guys back out, sorry. Man, that would have stunk. To go through that whole thing and be like, whoops. What's up, Ben? You just want some pets? Aw, you want to sit in my lap? Will that help you? Do you want to... Oh, okay. 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 Hi. Hello. I love you. All right. So again, we're going to add the 3 clips to the bottom of the bag, and then we're going to add clips at the top and then just kind of work our way throughout the center. This is where I like to grab my little tiny stapler. We're going to staple those curves, and it's going to help things from not shifting. Okay, you sit over there. Just kind of pinch that curve together. Hopefully you guys can see this. Okay, lining it up at the top. Down into the curve. And I only like to do one side at a time. I think some people do both, and I'm like, no, let's just stick with the one and then move on. So I'm adding staples at the outermost basting stitch. And I just add like 2 or 3 into the curve. You're just gonna cut this out. It doesn't stay in the bag. Okay. And that just helps keep it from shifting. What did you find, cat? Weirdo. A mustache. Fake mustache. Okay, so my stitch length is set at 4, and we're going to move in from the inner. So here's my outer edge now. It's the outer right side, and I'm going to watch the inner left side. No, the inner right side of the foot. I'm going to come in 1/8 of an inch from my innermost stitch line. Does that help? And that's going to be the perfect piping kiss. That's what we're going to call it. So just like 1/8 of an inch, maybe even a little less. And you can kind of feel the piping with your finger. You just want to be right out there. So using those staples helps me focus on the piping instead of my curves coming undone. And then just kind of resituate my foot. Focus on that piping. The piping is really what helps your panels go on correctly. It's kind of like a training guide in a way, as hard as it may be. But I love the piping. This bag can absolutely be made without the piping, but it really does help the shape of your bag and add a little bit of contrast. Make sure you back stitch quite a bit. And then before you trim your side panels, I always like to double check that you've caught your piping. So you can see there, it's nice and tight. It's not loose or anything like that. It's just really pretty piping. So now if you want, you can remove your staples. Make sure they go safely into the trash can. Or you can just cut it out. Depends on how much you don't care about your scissors. I have definitely cut through staples with my scissors, which is why they suck. You can also use thread snips to take them out. And just pinch them together. Get it in there. That's what she said. Okay. Although it's not great for your snips either. Okay, goodbye. Go into the trash before you go into my foot. Alright, so now we can go ahead and trim that seam allowance down to kind of like in between or right next to your outermost basting stitch, I guess. I don't know, it kind of varies. Wunderbar. Goodbye. Okay. And then we do it again. You can see this bag, the side panels are kind of floppy. So if you wanted to make them a lot stiffer, you could add some Decaville to those as well, or double up on your woven fuse. It just depends on how you want your bag to be shaped, pretty much. That's what it comes down to. All right. So again, we're going to line up our side panel center snips along the bottom. I like to add 3 clips go to the top. Essentially, your accent panels should line up. I'm gonna be honest, mine rarely do. So yeah. But that is the point of those. I have made this bag without adding the side accent panel. I would just make the side out of all vinyl, and that kind of decreases your chances of messing it up. Plus it looks really classy and saves on fabric. Unless your vinyl or leather is really expensive, then maybe don't do that. I don't know. It's just a suggestion. Okay. And again, I'm just going to use my little baby stapler. Staple that curve together so that I don't even have to think about it. All right, and we're gonna kiss the piping. Mwah. Since I changed my bobbin, I'm not really worried about running out of thread, because it's happened where like right here I run out of thread and I don't notice because I'm too focused on those curves to change my darn thread. Come on now. There we go. And then just double check that your piping is nice and tight. Looks pretty good. And we'll trim down our side panels, seam allowance, without getting too close, because that's bad. What, kitty baby? What? Okay, so that is the exterior all finished. So now we can turn our lining right side out. And stick it inside the exterior. The birthing hole is our zippered pocket, so keep in mind if you're using really, really thick fabrics, you'll want to make a wider birthing hole by maybe leaving one of the bottom seams open and not top stitching it. I'm starting by lining up my side seams, and then I'll clip the main panel. Again, clip that side seam, because if those don't line up, you need to readjust a seam allowance somewhere. It feels pretty good. Okay. Then I'm going to continue with my size 4 stitch length. And you can of course top stitch through the lining side, but I always like to see my exterior. Half-inch seam allowance from the top. And again, if you need to resituate your layers, make sure your needle is down. I like to add a little back stitch at these snap tabs. They're going to get a lot of wear and tear. And again, on those snap hooks, just one little back stitch. If you backstitch too much, you could end up perforating your vinyl, and that's not a good thing. You do not want that. Just kind of slowly. Just one little rapid fire backstitch. And then if your fabrics are really thick, you can trim your seam allowance, but I don't like to do that. I find that causes even more bulk within the top of the seam allowance, and it can create a wonky top stitch, which is no bueno. So now we are going to birth the bag, and that's going to be so fun with such thick fabrics. So I'm going to turn my iron on, and I'm going to steam the waterproof canvas because it's going to make it, again, more malleable, a little bit thinner, so that when we pull it, it's not so rigid. All right. I like to start with the bottom of my exterior first. It's a breech, baby, feet first. I just kind of fold it like a taco to get it through that pocket. And this is a really true test of your materials used, if it can withstand this process. I kind of pull on my lining as I'm pulling on the exterior. It's definitely a tough job. And then once you get it most of the way there, you can kind of push your lining out. Whew, almost there. Okay. So then I'll push my bottom out completely. Hopefully you guys are able to see this. I'm sorry. I keep it close to my body. I like use my body to help me push the bag as well. Then I'm just gonna stick that lining inside. I kind of leave the pocket out for now because I have to sew that closed anyway. But I leave it open while I clip, just in case something's wrong. I can easily open it back up. So all of your like little snap hooks and magnetic snap tabs, they're gonna get folded in. We're gonna top stitch those bad boys down. Oh man, I never added rivets. Not the end of the world. I sewed them on well enough. It's just more for looks. So again, that's going to get folded in. A few clips. And my bag looks kind of wrinkly now, but I can heat up my ironing board and lay my bag on top of the hot ironing board, and that'll help with that. fold that snap tab in. And just kind of roll the seam in between your fingers. Again, if you trim down your seam allowance, you'll have more to roll, I guess. You'll be able to feel it a little bit better, but I really think that can weaken your top seam. I don't know. So if anything, maybe keep your thicker interfacings out of your seam allowance. I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to push my lining into my bag, push out those curves. Kind of clip my pocket closed at the top. And then I'm going to heat up my ironing board really quick. I'm going to lay my bag on top. So hopefully you can see how much that helped. I literally just steamed my ironing board and laid the bag on top. So your snap should close nicely like that. And again, the shape of the bag is still really cute with the side panels out. So if this was all black, it would just look really sleek. But again, you can fold those in and it's a nice rectangular bag. So we'll go ahead and close this up so that you don't forget later. And you could use your thread zap for that too, but sometimes it's fun to just use the lighter. And then we'll stick that pocket inside the bag. Push those corners in. Okay. And now we're ready to top stitch. And if it's easier for you, you can flip your bag wrong or lining side out so you can top stitch in a circle. But this bag isn't too small that I can't top stitch it normal. So I'm going to start on a side panel and kind of on a black part of the fabric so I can disguise my back stitching. And sometimes you can make your back stitch like a size 2 and then bump it up to like 4.5 or whatever to continue your stitching. That just kind of helps secure your locking stitch, I guess. So in the center of this, I'm going to do some back stitching. And this being my snap hook on the side panel. And then we're getting close to the main snap tab, and I'm going to add a back stitch here and there throughout. And that can get kind of thick depending on what kind of fabric you use, so just make sure you go nice and slow over the height differences. And make sure everything's pointing inside the bag. If you have to resituate, make sure your needle is in the fabric. Snap tab again, just adding a few little back stitches. Okay, we're getting close to the other side. And then again, if you want to, you can disguise your back stitching with a smaller stitch length. It should be fine. And then I'm going to use my thread zap so that none of that frays. Or to help prevent it from fraying anyway. Okay. Whew. Shape it back out. It's a very roundy bag. So this is what it looks like all snap hooked as well. It's just a nice sleek design, I guess. In the past, I've added fusible fleece to this bag as well to help keep its shape. I'm gonna go ahead and attach our handles. Just slide it through, fold up, and you can sew like a box stitch, or you can add a rivet or 2 rivets, whatever you'd like to do. Strap ends. I believe I charge $110 for this bag at this size. And I think depending on the materials it's made out of, I can go up to $160. Okay. So in the intro you saw the handles all riveted on and everything, but that is the Swoon Charlotte. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe before you go.